All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is the first of three panels here at Heli-Expo. I did get a last-minute switch in speakers. Richie is supposed to speak for Whisk, but I didn't actually tell him where the room was, so hopefully he will be coming in, and we saved a seat for him. If not, we'll have a little bit more chance for dialogue. The way we're going to do this is each of the speakers will just first level set everybody about where they are with their company and their development and the whole roadmap, that path towards commercial operations. And then after that, we have a couple questions, a couple prompts for each of the speakers. And then we want to ask you, as the audience, to pose your questions to the panelists. So this is an open dialogue. It's an educational opportunity for you to learn more and answer your questions about when we're going to get to commercial operations and what are the remaining barriers to do that. So our first speaker, so we're sitting in alphabetical order from A to W. And that's the order that we'll be speaking here, at least initially. So our first speaker is Andra Steltemeier from Airbus Urban Mobility. She's a director of business cooperation. She was previously at Airbus Helicopters and also has past experience with a drone startup. So Andra, why don't you tell us where you are, where Airbus is?
First of all, thank you very much for having us here, Mike. I think it's a great opportunity to exchange with the industry. So where are we now? We have designed, assembled, and already flown 2 demonstrator in the past years. Right now, the 3rd demonstrator, the City Airbus Next Gen, had the power on in November last year. We are targeting to have got like the first flight during December. So all of our energy is right now fully focused on the flight test. You can really feel it when you're on site. And yeah, we are looking forward to an exciting year for us.
Very good. All right, and now continuing along down the alphabet here from Airbus to Archer. So we have Dr. Mike Romanowski, and I was thinking about I could have almost done this in reverse alphabetical or reverse length of names. But most people call Mike Dr. Mike, so I got that at least on one line. So Mike is the head of government relations at Archer. Before that, he had almost 10 years at the FAA, a couple other stints with the FAA, and was the aviation and aeronautics advisor to the chief technology officer of the U.S., which is in the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So, Dr. Mike.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you all for being here today. Where Archer is right now, Archer is developing a 4-passenger plus pilot air taxi, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft for urban air mobility missions. The aircraft we've had 2 flying prototypes, pre-production of our Midnight aircraft. We are building the first piloted versions of that to go into flight test. At the same time, we are building a high-rate production facility for the aircraft for when it does go into service, and that is being built in Covington, Georgia, southeast of Atlanta. And that facility will be capable of producing over 600 aircraft per year, and that's on track for being completed this summer. So a lot going on and a lot more to come. Thank you.
Great. All right. Our third speaker is Louis Perin, head of business development for the Americas for Eve Air Mobility, which of course is a subsidiary of Embraer. So he's been there 5 months or several months, but he's also got a broad experience base with Volocopter for several years, and excuse me, previously about 8 years with Embraer. So, Louis?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, the colleagues from the industry. Great opportunity for us to discuss. Eve Air Mobility, as Mike said, is a company that spun off from Embraer. That was back in 2019. And then we are developing in a similar fashion to our peers' vehicle that's, with 4 passengers. It's a piloted vehicle, so it's a crewed version. Where we're now in the development status is we're starting assembly of our first prototype, targeting to fly within 2024. Entry into service for us is scheduled within the year of 2026. We have selected our industrial footprint in a location that's down in Brazil. It's a city called Taubaté, so it's close to Embraer's headquarters, and we also made the investments on the first version of that production factory. So that's where we are right now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So next to Ryan Naru at Joby Aviation. He's a senior government affairs specialist. He's been there for a little over 3 years. I first met him previously when he was with regulatory affairs with Uber Elevate, which then became part of Joby. And I'm sorry, I do have you in the wrong order.
With all of the advanced technology at play, Jonathon and I still can't get a alphabetical order right.
Yeah, sorry.
Would you like us to stand up? And swap?
I'll go, Jonathon. Ryan Naru, Joby Aviation. Joby is a California company that's building an all-electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, what we believe to be the quietest VTOL aircraft perhaps ever built, aside from a hot air balloon. We are making great progress. In the last year, we operated the aircraft in New York City, demonstrated the really incredible noise profile to one of the most noise-sensitive vertical flight communities in the world to great acclaim, and I think that's one of those just rising tide moments for all of industry. Similarly, looking at serial production of our aircraft, we have initiated production of the aircraft in Marina, California. By December this year, we should be at 1 per month. We have aircraft that are now supporting Department of Defense missions and research at Edwards Air Force Base. And then lastly, we announced our Ohio production facility, which would be our high-rate serial production facility. That's kind of going steadily, right? We're going to start with getting the production line right in California and then scale up in Ohio. So just a huge year and a lot more ahead.
Great. And I don't know the alphabet, right? I'm an engineer, so I have a hard time alphabetizing things. But our next speaker is Jonathon Freye from Supernal, where he's the Director of Federal Affairs. Been there about 3 years, previously at National Air Transportation Association, and he was a senior policy advisor to the U.S. House of Representatives. John?
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Supernal is a part of the Hyundai Motor Group family of companies. We are, like everybody else, most everybody else, building a 4-passenger piloted aircraft, and we are also a company with significant presence here in California. This year, we're excited to be flying our full-scale tech demonstrator aircraft in Q4, and looking forward to certification of our SA2, which we recently unveiled at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in 2028.
Excellent. All right. So our alphabetically last speaker, Richie, got maybe an hour or two's notice and wasn't told what room it was in, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's why I'm all running up here, and I apologize to everyone for being a little bit late.
Well, you missed the introductions of the other speakers, but otherwise, so Aaron is in charge of growth and strategic partnerships at Whisk. He was previously the director of global sourcing for Douglas Dynamics in Portland, Maine for 11 years, and also served for 5 years in the Army. So, Aaron.
Thank you. Yes, so Aaron Richie with Whisk, and I handle business development there at Whisk. Whisk has been, as most folks here know, pursuing the design and certification of an autonomous air taxi. So that's where we are a little bit different than the other folks up here on stage. For folks who don't know, Whisk is a wholly owned subsidiary of Boeing, and we've been really excited. We're continuing the development and of our pre-production aircraft that we'll be testing here, hopefully later this year and into 25. We also have been very excited about our recent announcement as we've started developing the infrastructure on the ground that we'll need. We had a recent announcement in the Houston area with Sugarland that we were very excited about. So thank you very much.
Excellent. And that was exactly what you were supposed to say. So even though you didn't know that, he's a quick learner. All right. So now I'm going to ask a question of each of our panelists today. And then after that, then we'll, again, as I mentioned, invite your questions. So think of what you would like to ask. So first of all, to Andra, this session is about roadmap to commercial AAM operations. You got some updates. Now we're going to talk about challenges and then priorities. So Andra, what do you think are going to be like the first commercial operations, the key enablers, and major challenges for commercial operations?
Let me start with what does commercial flights mean for us as Airbus. It means they will start when we've got a safe product and a viable market. And this is not the case right now. We are currently looking with different operators, so also fixed wing as well as helicopter operators. We are analyzing potential routes, potential ConOps, the needs of the operators, and by doing so, we are trying to make step by step, making it real, making advanced air mobility real. This means so air medical services will be our first application and use case. The reason why we chose this use case is quite simple. We don't see advanced air mobility as something for like VIPs. We want to make it accessible for everyone. And as we all know, it won't be flying by tomorrow. You have got your eVTOL parking next to your house. We are looking into an application or a use case, what puts value add to the society. And this is how we selected the use case. This is our major focus in the past year, really looking in Norway. We did some projects in Japan. There are some others we cannot talk right now about it, but hopefully next time I can give you more insight on that one. And the air medical services, I think we all agree that we have the challenge of the battery and the energy efficiency. So this means for us, we won't transport somebody soon. So the first applications will be having an organ transport, a blood transport, where you've got like a clear route defined in advance, a clear time in advance. And this is kind of a scheduled flight, but not flying, or maybe flying the doctor from hospital A to hospital B. Of course, on a long run, we want to do these operations and make them really like when you've got like a car accident, like an emergency case where you bring the doctor. We looked into the use cases for air medical services, and in more than 90%, there is no transport needed afterwards, even with the emergency cases. So it's really important. We are talking about the diamond 10 up to 10 minutes, golden hour when there is like an accident, that you bring the doctor to the patient who's analyzing and checking what will be needed. And in the meanwhile, the car can arrive. So to sum up the commercial road for Airbus, it will be clearly air medical services with a safe product and opening the market through air medical services. And the second question was the key enablers. We as Airbus, we are looking advanced air mobility as an entire ecosystem. I know it's currently a big word, and we're having also like I think the second panel focus on that one, but it means all of the different puzzles needs to be in place to make it fly. All of these puzzles, so these are, for example, urban traffic management, right? How can we implement these new means of transport in the already existing air traffic management? And we are not only talking about, let's say, like complicated cases at an airport. So we are also looking with the Munich Airport International into this, like having slot neutrality, but also like in urban area, in urban space, where you've got maybe an emergency helicopter coming in. And then there's like the infrastructure. How does a vertiport look like? I don't think the vertiport will be in the beginning a vertiport. It could be also like a helipad, which will be used in the beginning. So all of that is an involvement when we talk about regulatory affairs, when we talk about the passenger operations, when you come with your luggage to the vertiport and where to put the luggage in there. all of these needs to be in place when we start that. So the enablers are, in a summary, it's air traffic management, it's infrastructure, it's passenger operation, customer experience. And when all of these comes together, we will start the commercial operation. What does it mean? It means for us as Airbus, we are not in a hassle. And this sounds maybe bold, but we will be ready when the market is ready, and this is our goal.
Okay, excellent. Well, you see, we'll have a range, a wide variety of perspectives. Our next speaker, Mike, Dr. Mike, will be giving his, can give his insights into the FAA reauthorization. So, if and when it's going to happen here, and you know, what are some of the what is needed for successful advancement into for the AAM industry, particularly for entry into service.
Thank you, Mike. And you know, folks may be sitting out there saying, FAA reauthorization, what does that matter for getting these products into the field, entry into service? Well, hopefully after I go through this, you'll understand why there are some things that are very critical for the successful introduction of this business. It will really streamline and enhance our ability to deliver on time and at a profitable cost. First thing that we saw, Congress has been very supportive of advanced air mobility concepts and really reflecting in the will of the people of the U.S. in doing so. So they're putting forward extremely strong support for the adoption of emerging technologies, products, and their operations and services. And they're also putting forward a very strong sense of urgency to get those capabilities deployed for the benefit of the public. What they've highlighted in their two bills, and you'll understand as I go through this, first is a need for much greater transparency from the FAA. Congress feels that they need to be much more transparent about where they're going, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how they're progressing. Secondly, they're looking for much greater accountability from the FAA and within the various components of the FAA to work as a unified entity. And that manifests itself as the need for regulatory certainty to all of the applicants out there to ensure that we know what we need to do to field a product and field our service. And that has become much more of an issue over the last couple of years when the FAA, as Mike famously wrote some good op-eds on this, switched from a Part 23 certification, which is small airplane certification framework for electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, to a special category custom crafted for every individual vehicle, a powered lift framework. And we're still, and then there are implications in terms of how you operate those that Ryan's going to talk about in depth for the operational and training things. But that creates confusion for us, but it also creates a wholesale lot of confusion for FAA staff in terms of their ability and how they execute on a daily basis, because you're asking them to operate from the exception, not the normal practices. And they require a lot of public notice and comment to execute and so on. So it's really been a challenge. That doesn't mean we haven't made significant progress and continue to make significant progress though. So a couple things here, and I'm going to try to go through these quickly. First thing is, they said Congress gave very clear leadership direction to the FAA. And this extends beyond advanced air mobility, but they did put forward a reorganization of the FAA to better prepare it to accept and align and enable the introduction of new entrants into the aviation system. So to improve the alignment and advance those new products and organizations. And one of the things, particularly in the House bill, is very effective, is they built accountability at the top of the agency. They've named a new career deputy administrator for safety and operations, who is responsible for the strategic planning and execution of the FAA's work program to bring new entrants into the FAA. So it's very clear accountability, built a new management board framework to execute that, moved the chief operating officer of the air traffic organization under that new associate, or the new deputy administrator, and tasked the air traffic organization to ensure they're enabling new entrants and have equity for all mass users. So there's a lot that's powerful there in terms of bringing that alignment. At the same time, they've created a new assistant administrator for rulemaking and regulatory improvement. Nice coin phrase there at the end there, the regulatory improvement, with the goal that they streamline and modernize rulemaking and address all of the frequent waivers and exemptions that are required for emerging products. As the UAS crowd will tell you, that is the norm. They only get into the system by exemption. Okay, so we need the framework. And they also are very clear, and they put this in many times, replace your prescriptive rules with performance-based rules. So that is something that this new deputy administrator, or new assistant administrator will be doing. And that aligns with a mandate to do a wholesale, outsourced evaluation of the rulemaking process and bring improvements to it, and that's tasked to the National Academy of Public Administration. So they have followed up this here with that leadership direction with specific policy direction, and some of that, the linkage there is really a number of things they call sense of commerce, which really is much more the why to the what. The specific provisions in the legislation are the what you're going to do, but this kind of says why you're going to do. And so they said bring industry more closely into the rulemaking process. You're not gathering the benefit of that engagement. Find ways. They were very specific and said on the SFAR, the Special Federal Air Regulation for VTOL operations and pilot qualification, they said start working with the manufacturers before you finalize that rule to understand what they're doing and make sure that the rules are going to work. Okay, and then they also highlighted with the performance-based rules, start advocating that use of more standards, consensus standards, as opposed to waiting for all the prescriptive guidance to develop. And finally, the Senate was actually really clear. They said, look, the FAA, you need to position yourself as the global leader in advanced air mobility and act as that global leader, and do that by prioritizing the certification of these aircraft, adhere to your stated deadlines for rulemaking and policy development, and promote the global acceptance of U.S. advanced air mobility products in this nebulous regulatory framework we're in right now. And then what was really important, particularly on the infrastructure side and the operational side, is leverage the existing aviation system to the greatest extent possible. So there's a lot of conversation about, well, is a vertiport different than a heliport? Can an eVTOL land at a heliport, or do they need to have a vertiport? Well, very clear, they expect us to operate out of heliports. We've got a massive infrastructure. We've got a massive infrastructure of existing airports. So they put a lot in there. A couple things that are most critical, just, Mike, sorry for rambling here, but I mentioned the SFAR a few times. The SFAR put a number of challenges in the face of the industry to comply with the proposal. I got to commend HAI, now VAI, along with a coalition of several associations to unify comments and elevate the concerns with the SFAR. In fact, I don't know if Alon's in here today, but she wrote an article when those comments went into the FAA saying they've never seen such unified positioning from the general aviation community, and that this is something to take note of. But there are challenges in there to bringing successful operations on a timely way. So much so that Congressman Van Drew, Congressman Johnson immediately put a amendment into the House bill, which has passed the full House of Representatives, and then Senator Budd did the same in the Senate to ensure, and that has passed the committee there, so they're in both bills, and it's viewed as the backstop. And Ryan, if I ever cede the mic over to you, you'll be able to talk about this. But it's there to ensure, it's the backstop to ensure that there really is a practical pathway to operations and pilot qualification for any aircraft that the FAA type certifies as safe. A few other things that I'm just going to speed dial these up. There's also rulemaking to bring us the certainty that we need to bring on the aircraft side and the propulsion side. The leverage in that rulemaking will be an arc which engages the industry to bring the recommendations to the FAA, and the FAA to do the rulemaking based on those recommendations. And that'll allow the FAA to take full advantage of all the myriad of lessons learned that have gone on over the last couple of years to bring effective regulation and that certainty to bear. They've also looked for, again, looking for that validation. What are the most effective ways to ensure the acceptance and validation of vehicles around the globe? Infrastructure-wise, align the vertiports and heliports constructs and streamline the National Environmental Protection Act, the NEPA reviews going forward for new vertiport infrastructure, and so on. But again, some very strong signals from the Congress, and very important for the health of the entire industry and the AAM industry in particular to see these things come to fruition as we go through the legislative process.
All right, Mike, that was quite the tour de force of FAA needs. Mike alluded to before, originally this was seen as being a Part 23, airplanes with vertical takeoff and landing capabilities. And then they went to the 2117B, the special category, which made things so much more complicated. Congress is trying to give the FAA the urgency and the support and the direction for improvements. And I think those are really important for the agency to get. So switching gears again, we'll go to Louis. Can you talk about the kind of the types of customers, use cases, launch plans, and then of course like roadblockers that are common to all of the AAM OEMs, and how to make the industry take off?
Thanks, Mike. By the way, we appreciate, I think, what Dr. Mike said about all the associations pulling the voice forward and us as an industry trying to build this new segment of the market. For us in particular, this always starts with our customer base. So we have letters of intent from around 28 operators, adding up to 2,800 eVTOLs globally. And it starts with their input. It's ultimately up to them where they want to launch and what kind of use case they will prioritize. In the beginning, United Airlines has made public their plans to add these services to one of their hubs in San Francisco with our aircraft. And then obviously something that adds a lot of value for them is the airport shuttle use case, so that we can get people from the communities directly to the airport, skipping traffic and all the time-saving value proposition that we already know. In other regions of the world, so internationally, Brazil is another example of different use cases. São Paulo is a very mature helicopter market. A lot of our customers operate over there today, so leveraging again the existing infrastructure for airspace and physical space that we're talking about. That's more of a point-to-point use case, even though the airport shuttle case is still there. So that's I think the two major use cases, and then we have a third group that we can say is special missions. Like Andra said very well, the purpose of the organ transplant and moving around, I think it's very powerful for us to tackle with this new technology that's zero direct emissions in flight. So it adds a lot of value and purpose to whatever we're doing. So we do have some operators that perform that use case as well. And there is a demand for sightseeing, some nature areas, some city areas that some of our customers operate these types of flights. They add some simplicity on the infrastructure. We're talking about an A-to-8 fly rather than A to B, so the infrastructure challenge is a little less daunting. And that's, I think, one of the roadblockers that we can see for a lot of our customers, the infrastructure piece. There are some very long lead time items that need to be addressed. I think that the power needed to charge these vehicles at scale is not to be taken for granted. So we're working with utility providers and airports to make sure that we have that capacity to charge these vehicles. And airspace integration, I'd say, it's also a common roadblocker that we need to address. In more mature markets, if we take the example of São Paulo, for instance, there are very well-established VFR corridors to operate, at least in the beginning. But once we get to a certain threshold, still, numbers to be checked. But as we get to scale, we will need different procedures to integrate into the airspace, and that on its own can take a long time to be established as these new procedures come along. So these, I think, are two very common roadblocks for us as an industry as we build this new segment of the market.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So you brought up infrastructure. So Jonathon, if you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of insight into electric charging and infrastructure for the audience.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. There's been a lot of ink spilled about what the industry will need in terms of infrastructure in order to scale. I want to just spend a couple of moments talking about how we potentially get to scale in the context of planning and investments that will be necessary to get us to build out an infrastructure network. I think the first, with respect to the planning and preparation process, right? I mean, it's long. For legacy aviation, the process of planning even, minor changes at existing airports is a process that can take months, years sometimes, and a lot of forethought. And, it doesn't help that we as an industry continue to hear conflicting declaratives, I guess, from NREL and from the FAA on what the industry's demand will be for electricity, and then subsequently what grids at sort of all levels, regional and local, can accommodate. Airports and FBOs will also have to complete a 7640 and an update to their airport layout plan, even if, again, speaking to minor changes, if they want to install some kind of an aircraft charger or charging infrastructure. So, my admonishment to those of you who are here that may be potential sponsors of charging projects or advanced air mobility infrastructure moving forward is to start that process now to the extent that you can. In terms of investments, we now have two leading charging protocols out there. And Mike mentioned that there's really favorable language in the FAA reauthorization that I think will stick when the bill is finally passed. But grant funding or public funding of any kind is subject to political whims and wins, right? And so policymakers prefer to fund projects that have a diverse mix of public and private partnerships, but also a very broad reach. And to the extent that electrification projects or infrastructure projects sort of writ large, but especially on electrification, to the extent that they can future-proof against the evolution of more powerful aircraft and incorporate the sort of the highest levels of technology agnosticism, I think there will be more attractive investments for both the public sector and private funding as well. How do we do this though? How do we, as an industry, for those of us who are sitting here and those of you who are sitting out there, how do we get to a point where we're all sort of singing from the same song sheet in terms of promoting, the policies that are good for infrastructure build out? The HAI staff just finalized a really well done and thoughtful tool for states and local governments on promoting these kind of policies that are supportive of the industry, and I think that's a really good start. You're all here because you are a part of this association. If you're not, you should join. I think these are the forums that we can start to have these conversations and the tools, the advocacy piece that associations like HAI are doing. are really important to help set these policies out that will improve infrastructure and make sure that we have a build out that serves as many operators as it can. So,
All right.
Thanks.
Excellent. Ryan, so Dr. Mike talked about the SFAR for powered lift. Can you talk about that a bit, and specifically, the intersections between the SFAR, the FAA reauthorization, and alignment with the ICAO and other guidance?
Yeah, happy to. And maybe before I do that, one of the great joys of working for Joby is that we are not just a manufacturer of aircraft, but we are also going to be the 135 operator, the air carrier for that aircraft. We are going to be the repair station. We're going to be the training services provider. We get to even deploy infrastructure, right? There is such a breadth of what Joby covers that while I've heard many challenges defined by my peers on the panel, Joby, as a leader in this industry, and arguably a market maker, if I can toot our own horn too much, sees a path through all these challenges. There are solutions, and there are markets that are really craving this kind of optionality, right, in terms of transportation. Maybe to address the question, though, specifically about the SFAR, its intersection with FAA reauthorization, and how that aligns with ICAO. I think that if you're an airplane pilot or a helicopter pilot in the room and you have an instrument rating, you know that your airplane instrument rating is not a privilege for you to operate a helicopter in instrument conditions. And there's a very clear reason for that. The human-machine interface, right, the controls for those categories of aircraft have typically been quite distinct, right? Airplane controls similar to each other, helicopter controls similar to each other, very little, though, in terms of transferability. That is why we have a system of categories, at least in the United States regulatory system for pilot qualification and privileges. Powered lift, and I think maybe not just powered lift, but the introduction of full-time fly-by-wire aircraft begins to upend that system, right? We can no longer look at external characteristics of an aircraft as a proxy for what the controls will typically be. I've had the opportunity actually to fly the simulators of many of my peers' aircraft, and while there has been a convergence maybe for some of us around unified flight controls, which are airplane adjacent controls, there are also other equally viable control schemes, for example, with the AW609, which is somewhat more aligned with a helicopter, right? Because they intend to market that aircraft to existing helicopter operators. Now, when you look at what was proposed by the SFAR, it essentially re-entrenches a 1997 decision to develop a new category for pilot qualifications and privileges with the assumption that all of these aircraft would have similar controls. That has not played out. The FAA's own rulemaking in the preamble explains that has not played out. In fact, though, that was their justification for not establishing classes. Makes your head scratch a little bit. And so, essentially, I think that, as Dr. Mike alluded to, we in industry said, hey, this actually introduces safety risk, right? You don't want to incentivize a future AW609 pilot to go seek a cheaper, easier to fly eVTOL to build their 50 hours in a powered lift and then transfer over with a type rating and be able to fly. But then again, if you're willing to accept that, what it then unlocks for you is the realization that type ratings are this perfect framework that is very much adaptable to transferring an existing commercially rated pilot into this new type of aircraft. You have a number of post-qualification frameworks that could be applied to make sure that you season that newly type-rated pilot for the aircraft before, flying my mother over New York City. And so I think that, when I look at what we've developed, we, in unified flight control in particular, has a 30-year heritage right? Coming from the kinetic research in the UK with the VOC Harrier into the X-35, now the F-35B. And over that time, there has been no accidents, incidents attributed to the training program for those aircraft. Those aircraft do not have a dual set of controls. The F-35B, as we all know, does not have a dual set of controls. It's not a dual cockpit aircraft. The principles of what we see as flight training today, though, administratively require a dual set of controls. And it's kind of ignoring this really crucial data, right? That our full mission simulators have such incredible fidelity today. They are better instruction tools. In fact, I would argue essential instruction tools for these types of aircraft to be able to dial a disaster, scenario-based training. We need our pilots to experience what a battery failure is like and how to perform adequate mitigation procedures in a thermal runaway event, for example, if they experience one in flight. All that's to say, ICAO has actually a SARP 2.1.1.4 in Annex 1 that says you may provide a type rating, like a type rating is an acceptable qualification mechanism for an existing airplane or helicopter pilot. The FAA Reauthorization Act, the House bill specifically, invokes 2.1.1.4 as the preferred mechanism to get this industry off the ground. And I think that, happy to take questions about it later. As you can see, I'm really passionate about this issue. So.
I just have to say, I've spent a lot of time in flight simulators. I've never heard one referred to as dial a disaster, but I really like that, so I'm going to use that.
And I'll just say, I worked in the Joint Strike Fighter Program office in the 1990s. There was a big, leap of faith to go from this twin engine to single engine for the naval aviation enterprise. Like going from 2 seats to 1 seat of a single seat, powered lift trainer, it was a no-brainer. Of course, we don't need to, spend all that money and develop a second aircraft with, separate aircraft type with a back seat. So we hope that the FAA will learn those lessons from the 1990s and be in the 21st century. So.
Well, you certainly don't have the same problems we do when you don't have to have a pilot, but you do have remote monitoring pilot. That's pretty exciting.
We definitely recognize, and I think would agree with a lot of folks here, that the paradigm needs to shift, and we would encourage that. While as an autonomous operation without a pilot on board, it is a different set of considerations, but there's a lot of similarity. There's a lot of similarity in some of the challenges that we face in figuring out the certification pathway. But we're very supportive of, I think, a lot of the things that have been set up here, that we're going to work together with FAA to help them to understand how this kind of modern, again, this modern technology isn't the same as what it was before, and that there is a new opportunity. But yeah, no, I think it's very, very similar to what was said.
And Aaron, can you also talk about like scaled operations?
Yeah.
I think that's really a key with autonomy.
Absolutely, and you'll see some very common themes to what other folks were talking about here. We think about this, there's kind of 3 pillars. Obviously, we have to get through the aircraft certification process. We need that clarity from the regulator on what that looks like. We think that's gone, and it's moved along very nicely. But we also need the clarity around the 135, the operational certification as well. And then we've spent a lot of time talking about the pilot certification. So those are the 3 pillars for us on kind of what we need in order to think about scaling. The whole industry is going to need all of this as well. And then you can throw in infrastructure, and finally something that wasn't kind of talked about here, but is, I think, a consideration for all of us, and that's really the industrial base to be able to support scale as well, making sure that we have all of the right suppliers. And there's been a real push from a regulatory standpoint in Washington to make sure that we're supporting the development of a U.S. industry that has the battery capability, et cetera, to be able to support AAM as it scales. So.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, we are exactly on time. It was 45 minutes. We've got about 15 minutes for audience questions and answers. So there is, let's see, we had a mic for running around, and I'm sorry, Rex, I'm going to deputize you. Can you grab the mic from the gentleman here with the AV? And we had a question up here. So Rex Alexander is the advisor for VFS, Vertical Flight Society for Infrastructure, and he's running the panel tomorrow on infrastructure. That is tomorrow, right, Rex? Yes, sir. Yeah, it's 1 o'clock tomorrow in here. Yes, sir. Question.
Oh, yes, thank you, Andra and gentlemen. My name is Anwar from San Francisco International Airport.
Very
I had a
good.
question to Aaron. You mentioned the 3 silos, right? Aircraft cert, 135, pilot cert. In addition to that, kind of ad hoc industrial base and infrastructure, what about the economics of eVTOL flight? Do they actually, is it a financially viable model? What are you going to charge? And is the community in approval of such a new aircraft?
No, these are great questions. I'll touch on a couple of things. We've talked a little bit about the financial model. Published them targets are at $3 to $4 a passenger mile for our aircraft, but we do think it's affordable. We do think that this is something that scales, but our key philosophy is that it only scales with autonomous operations. You know, if you take one of those revenue-producing seats and you put a pilot in it, there's an expense, and there's also there's some other questions there as well. We think that our approach will be the best, the most efficient to scale, the quickest. That's core to our business philosophy. So,
Do you really think autonomous eVTOLs are going to happen in the next 25 years?
yeah, absolutely, we do, and we're well on our way to working with regulators and other folks to make that happen here by the end of the decade.
Aaron, sorry. Go ahead. No.
I was just going to just add, if piloted eVTOL haven't been approved, how can you even start thinking of autonomous? So not to rain on your parade, but
No, not at all. Great questions. You know, again, we look at other folks in the industry. They're helping to blaze that path, but there really is a direct path. We're working every day with regulators on this, and while we understand that others in industry may not have heard as much about this, this has been something that we've been doing for the last 10 years. So we really do see that path there.
Yeah, I think you have to also look at this as parallel paths, right? They are
Absolutely.
not sequential and in series. Their success is not dependent on our success. There's an incredible technological roadmap that has been executed against by our peers in industry. You look at X-Wing, Reliable Robotics, Whisk. There is phenomenal new advancements in technology, and the regulatory participation, right, to follow that journey to its completion with early engagement, testing and demonstration activities is really impressive, right? It's like we're in this incredible new era, the age of electric flight, and I know that the passion that we feel is being also felt by our regulatory partners. I see it, you know, I feel it, and so I believe in their mission too.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you know, I think
We
that-
believe in yours
yeah.
as well. This is a big pie. There's enough room for everyone.
Absolutely. You know, so, and then just to build on the economics thing too, you know, my first job in aviation was a maintainer. I used to work on Cirrus aircraft, and that's a pretty typical GA aircraft, but to see my customers' aircraft down for a week or two, right, as we're doing engine maintenance, contact maintenance, because we need parts, you know, we got to get it in series and sequence. It means that that's not a revenue generating asset for 2 weeks. And if you go and take a look at the Whisk aircraft on the floor, you'll see that all of the propulsion systems are modular, they are human scale, they allow you to remove and replace the systems, send the cores out for rebuild, right? But that asset is back in service and doing meaningful work the next day or the...
And I'm going to have Ryan down at the booth as well,
Yes.
giving some
Yes.
tours. We appreciate that.
I mean, that's what got me into electric flight, was just this sudden human scale of propulsion systems and other systems on the aircraft, along with all the other amazing things, low noise, right? It's transformative.
I will say one of the unique things about this industry, though, is the support that every one of us has for the other's success up here, and that's great. So thank you, Ryan.
Aaron, I just want to ask, so you're a wholly owned subsidiary of Boeing.
We are.
And you have not only in the military side lots of autonomy, but also on the commercial operations, right? So your aircraft fly with a lot of autonomy in the cockpit, right? And you're very familiar with, you know, what the FAA allows, and that also helps to bolster your roadmap for autonomous operations.
It does. We're backed by a leader in you know, military autonomous operations, so it does give us a significant advantage.
Another question from the audience. Yes, sir. Rex, there's one over here in the front, or unless you see another one. Here with next to Bob.
Thank you. This one's for Ryan. Just curious on, I actually wasn't aware that you came from a maintenance background, but When you look at what Joby is trying to do and have a 135, 145 manufacturing their own aircraft, that model seems restrictive from a customer standpoint. You know, what does that look like based on the restrictions that could be out there? How do you see Joby kind of navigating around those?
Yeah, so first we get to be masters of our own destiny, right? And we, you know, Lewis was talking about customer requirements. We are our own customer, so we understand our requirements best and have been able to iterate our product in such a way that it is really what we believe the perfect aircraft for the perfect fit for the perfect market, right? I also will say that we have incredible partners, be it Delta Airlines, who will be a demand generator for us on the airport shuttle routes, or Uber, right? I came from Uber Elevate. I think that what goes severely understated is the first and last mile connectivity to the aviation infrastructure and how critical that a seamless and magical journey will be for customer adoption. So I actually am, you know, really, really encouraged by the approach we're taking to this problem, because by reducing external dependencies, we have a little bit more certainty on where we end up.
Well, and to add to that, how do you, so I come from a maintenance background, and I could see that being, you know, wherever your guys' operations would be, not potentially having adequate infrastructure like maintenance staffing and, you know, different things like that could potentially, you know, limit your growth, whereas, you know, the other panelists would be able to have, you know, 145 repair facilities or other network take care of their aircraft, not necessarily, you know, by that specific company.
Well, I think that this is a universal issue in aviation, right? It's what the average age of a maintainer is today, and the kind of retirement rates that we're seeing, and without the kind of replacement rates to make up for it, is a challenge for everyone. Which is why I think that, you know, a number of my federal affairs colleagues here in the U.S. really focus on workforce development as a key cornerstone to our advocacy as well. For Joby, that means partnership with Fly Compton, with Aviation High School in New York City, making sure, you know, there are pathways for those students into on-the-job training for, you know, Joby operations. I think that it is absolutely worth looking at the frameworks that we have today for maintainer qualification in the face of new technologies like electric propulsion, and question whether or not going through the piston and turbine curricula is actually a benefit or not. Perhaps, I think the maintainer discipline, right, is something that you get no matter what through those kinds of programs, but I was an apprentice and I feel like I came out all right, so.
Great. Well, I want to go up the alphabet now and ask a question. So we've been talking about a lot about the FAA and the U.S. Environment, and because EASA is obviously also very important, could you just give maybe a thumbnail on what EASA is doing as far as SC, VTOL, and AAM?
Yeah. So in 2018, the EASA has published the SC VTOL. So far we are all, I mean, it's a landscape of regulation, so and everything is in development, and the paramount of all of that is safety. And I mean, one of the differences is that the SC VTOL has been built up from scratch, especially for eVTOLs and the operation of eVTOLs, and the design of eVTOLs, and this differs from the FAA approach quite, yeah. However, I mean, we are Airbus, right? Our heart is European, so we chose, it's not a secret that we are targeting first EASA certification. And of course, we are monitoring regularly FAA. We're in touch with the FAA, but we are keen on the harmonization between EASA regulation and FAA regulation. So this is our path also to commercialization, so coming back to the starting point. With regards to the training, so the basis is like the CPL, and you do like additional training for battery management, power management. You do additional training for weather changes. So the pilot got trained for these, let's say, for these certain challenges as being a pilot for an eVTOL in comparison to being a pilot for a helicopter. Of course, there are similarities, so I strongly believe in that it's additional training based on the already existing, and at a later stage, when we've got all of the know-how combined, we can also approach and draw out like something new from scratch in regards to training. But I think this is how it's foreseen, and that's from Airbus' perspective a certain right way, to be quite honest. And this is what I believe in. That we're in a learning phase. So we are learning how to build, how to fly with a new way of flying, because we are flying electric. And also looking on the product portfolio, it's not a replacement of a helicopter. We have to be really honest to ourselves. It is additional product within as an aviation platform. But it's not like, I mean, currently looking at, I mean, we are all sourcing the same cells with regard to batteries. And I'm a little bit wondering, following the discussion, I'm wondering two things. The first thing is, I'm missing a little bit the challenge of social acceptance, and this might be different between the US and the European approach, but one of the biggest roadblockers can be the social acceptance, right? And this is also why we chose the way of air medical services, because, as I said already, it's we want to do it for purpose, for a reason. And the second thing, and I'm searching for a better word, but I will say it now, and please excuse it in advance. I feel a little bit being the party pooper. It's looking at the autonomous flying, right? Two thoughts about that. First thought is, electric flying is a complete new technology. Of course, you can make use of the expertise, and we as Airbus, and we make use of the already existing expertise, but it's something completely new against the natural rules of physics, because the natural rules of physics is make it light so it lifts light and it's more efficient in the air. Batteries are heavy, right? And the second thing, this autonomous flying is a second new technology, not used in aviation. Of course, we're having some automatization instruments in there, but knowing all of these challenges, I don't foresee autonomous flying eVTOLs by the end of the decade. And I wish you all of the best and good luck, and I think it's really interesting. I see it on a long way, but autonomous flying is not about flying when everything works well, right? When you've got like shiny weather and everything is working out great and you feel like being the best pilot in the entire world. The question about autonomous flying is when it comes to a failure, how does the system react then? How does the pilot react then? And right now the pilots are trained to cope with these failures, right? To do the right things at the right timing when the things are not going well. This is what they are trained for. And these are a lot of questions where we are looking into. So we are, of course, as Airbus, we are also looking at, we are having autonomous strategy in place. But for us, we need to really find out all of these, or we need to find answers to all of these different questions among the autonomous flights before we can say, yeah, we are targeting to fly with our City Airbus Next Gen by tomorrow, autonomous, and I would love to. So, yeah, I think these are my two thoughts on the panel today.
All right. Excellent. Well, we have run out of time, so I will.
Yeah, we'd love to throw in a couple of thoughts along the way with that as well. Just really briefly.
Sorry.
We think we hear the concerns. I actually feel like we attended the wrong forum here. Roadmap to commercial operations. It's a discussion of autonomy, but we are happy to have that. We think that the safety case that's actually made by our approach to autonomy, and I won't get into all the technical details here. We've got a lot of great stuff on our website, and I encourage you to come down by the booth. We can have some one-on-one conversations about it. But our approach to autonomy is actually safer. That it's built on proven technology that's already certified, and it is safer than the traditional piloted vehicle. And we think that the safety case is there. We understand that there's some folks who aren't ready to go down that direction, but we really do know that this is the direction that not only are we all going to end up going in, but that this is going to be safer than the traditional piloted approach. So we don't want to leave it with that. Again, I don't want to turn this into an autonomous operations debate, but it is something that's worthwhile discussing in further detail.
Not every organization is structured for innovation. But I just want to perhaps also speak to the societal acceptance thing, right? And that's only proven through actual operations, like what we did at the downtown Manhattan heliport. We had a very vocal anti-helicopter community invited to the event. Stop the chop. They came and they were blown away. They wrote a page-and-a-half essay to the mayor saying this is exactly what we've been asking for years, right? These kinds of aircraft can transform the urban landscape. Second anecdote, my dad, right, used to commute an hour and a half to New York City every day, plus the time that he had to take the train after he got to Grand Central. So nearly 2-hour one-way trip, 4-hour total. Products like this will give people an option. Maybe it's not every day, but maybe once a week, once a month, right? To be able to do the work they need to do, but also be with their families when they want to be. And I think that when people, as we get closer to actually product launch and we pivot our public, persona from a manufacturer or an innovator to actually a consumer product, right? There's going to be a lot of people who want that option in their lives.
All right, I'm going to cut it off there. And just as kind of some closing remarks, the companies up here have flown for combined tens and tens and tens of thousands of flights and miles and lots of flight hours. We are learning a lot from these demonstrators. We're learning a lot from the studies, the surveys of communities, these kind of demonstrations. There are so many challenges still to address and to overcome. We're a technology organization. Vertical Flight Society is a technical, represents the technical development. So we're very bullish on technology and the future. And these companies are some of the best in the world to demonstrate the capability and deliver these products to the marketplace in the years and decades to come. And one of the folks from Archer one time said that the aircraft they're delivering now is going to be the worst aircraft they ever build. And that's really what you're seeing now is the iPhone, when it came out in 2009, you look at it today, it kind of sucked, But now you look at the iPhone, 15, whatever it is. I'm an Android myself, but whatever. It's really, you can't live without your smartphone anymore. And I think that's what we'll see with AAM, where the first ones are going to be really cool, and then a decade later, they could be potentially indispensable parts of our lives. So again, thank you all for coming. Tomorrow's it's 15 minutes earlier. It's at 1 o'clock tomorrow and Thursday on infrastructure. Mr. Rex Alexander, Mr. Infrastructure himself, will be running that panel. So thank you very much. And thank you again to our esteemed panelists.